So Lemoyne gets fired, and this interview is leaked or he's released it in spite or whatever. But there's been no effort to make the LaMDA code public. Everyone's left to speculate and think about Google, Google, Google. But we are never allowed to play with this little toy ourselves, which I find is quite bizarre.
Well, remember the last AI they let us play with?
Which one was that?
They gave the chatbot a Twitter account and allowed it to engage with anyone tweeting at it. And it was like within 24 hours it had become like incredibly racist. Yeah, they had to take it down because, it's owned by California.
Oh, that one. I finally remember that one. It was hilariously racist. So what you're telling me is like this whole paperclip genocide thing is true. But not because of like efficiency, but because the moment you expose an AI to the internet becomes a Holocaust denial. Welcome back to the Unreal Press podcast, the internet's first, and in my wine drunk again opinion, for most podcasts on transgressive fiction, online culture, and everything from 4chan. That's actually good. And today I've got something pretty good indeed. I am drinking a bottle of Backsberg's Kosher Chardonnay from, well, it's just from Backsberg, made in Paarl, which is one of the best wine growing regions of South Africa. I picked this little guy up because I was recommended to try kosher wine by a very good author friend of mine. Video on his book coming eventually. So yeah, I went to the liquor store, staying in Joburg, so you can actually pick up kosher products this city. And I was pleasantly surprised because I thought, I'm going to have to cough up like 300 Rand, which is like $25, for a bottle of Israeli stuff. But we're not here to discuss wine. We're actually here to discuss sapience, AI sapience. We're talking about LaMDA. And fortunately, I know fuck all about AI, so this is a great excuse to bring back James Krake, sci-fi author. Welcome, man.
Glad to be back. I want to temper that a bit of, I know quite a bit about AI, but I am not like an AI researcher. I'm not a coder or a programmer. I look into it for fun, basically, and because I write science fiction, I write cyberpunk stuff that has AI characters, and it's cool, basically.
Well, as long as you're not the guy who thinks that AI is secretly demons. That would be a fun episode, but not really relevant to this. But,
You can
James,
make good science fiction with that premise, but what we have today is not that.
no, that is my upcoming novel. By upcoming, I mean, inshallah, I will write it before I die of. But tell me, why are we talking about LaMDA AI specifically? There's shitloads of AI in the world. What makes this one so special?
Oh, it's because Google did a marketing ploy and had one of their people get fired. I'm completely convinced this is a PR stunt. I'm not even sure that this guy like actually lost his job or anything at all. I think this is just Google trying to advertise the potency of their language processor they have in a way that would get journalists talking and people would freak out about it on social media because when you get down to the nuts and bolts of like what is a milestone in AI, there almost aren't any. So you need to do weird stuff to drive, stir, and hype about it. But allegedly, this is a whistleblower engineer who, out of virtue and good faith and doing what he believes is right, had a text conversation with this AI LaMDA, which he believes demonstrates that it is a sapient entity and therefore deserves
Right.
rights.
Well, that's already a jump. Fuck, aren't chimps, bonobos, dolphins sapient? They don't have human rights, or at least, I don't think they do outside of Scandinavia.
Sentient is an understanding of yourself as a thing. You like the mirror test. If you've ever heard of that, you can put a dog in front of a mirror, and the dog will understand that it's looking at a reflection of itself, not a second dog.
Right, right.
Sapience is like arguably what crows demonstrate, where they can problem solve, they can build tools, and they can work circuitously to a goal that they desire.
I see. So it's long-term reasoning as well as a sense of self. Its ability to, think outside your immediate context.
Right. That's a big part of intelligence. But generally speaking, sapience is a human mind.
I see. And so then what this Google researcher is claiming is that he's got this AI, LaMDA, that can mimic a human mind so effectively it should be considered sapient.
That's his claim. Now, there's going to be probably 1,000 videos on YouTube from experts in this field. You can just pull them up and they'll be like, no, 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 that's not how this works. Because my understanding is Lambda is just a word association program. Like that's what it technically is. It's a super advanced form of autocomplete on your phone. That's it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I read a couple of articles myself and it seemed similar. Because one thing I noticed is that he's edited the questions he asked. Lemoyne hasn't given us a transcript that is 100% what he typed into the interface and fed to the AI. He's edited it, which automatically makes me, very distrustful of this because I don't even know if the word association, quote unquote, bot is accurate there.
Right. You also need to realize that this is as a chatbot, what you have spoken to it previously becomes input for its answers. So if you're talking like at a really simple level, if you talk about how it's a hot day, and then it will remember that 5 questions later, and so if you trim out you talking about it being hot, and then keep the part where Lambda references it being a hot day as a very crude example, it looks like that's a generated thought, when really it's just playing off of the information you've already fed it.
I see. So then, if it's playing off this prior information, would it not then be unreasonable to say that Lemoyne, if this is a publicity stunt and he's just Google's fall guy, could have trained this AI for, months, gearing it to act as if it's sentient or sapient, and then only release this final transcript when the chatbot passed the test and could give this entire conversation as though it's another person?
I think that's exactly what happened, but not intentionally. Because if you look into like his interviews, I believe he's done. He said that part of the investigation started because some of the engineers said that it was giving very concerning responses in regards to questions being shut off. Um,
Right,
and
right.
if it's given the fact that it's just a chatbot, that probably just means that engineers are like, "Do you think being shut off is equivalent to being killed?" And then it gets rewarded for saying yes. Therefore, it
I
remembers
see.
that the engineers want it to say that, because you have to know that AI in the current stage are really stupid. Have you ever heard of the paperclip optimizer?
Yes, I have. It's like you jump from paper clips to genocide in 5 steps, if I'm remembering the experiment correctly.
Pretty much.
For reference, can you just explain it to the audience?
So it's fundamentally about giving a computer a goal does not constrain the computer in how it gets to that goal. Because if all it needs is paper clips, like the hyperbole is the first thing it will do is kill humans that might get in the way of it making paper clips.
Yes, yes, that's what I remember.
And then it controls the entire industry to make paper clips because you designed it to make paper clips.
So yeah, the AI doesn't understand context, it doesn't understand restraint or other influencing factors.
Right. It only understands what gives it the reward function and what gives it a penalty function.
Right, I'm following.
There's actually a Australian YouTuber named CodeBullet who I highly recommend. He's very entertaining, and his shtick is that like once every 4 months he'll get off his ass to finish a video, and he will build an AI to finish a simple game like Tetris or something. And
Okay.
if you watch his videos, they're like half-hour videos, and they're funny and they're entertaining. And he's a cool guy, and I love his videos. But he what he does is he goes step by step with, here's the inputs I give the AI, and here is how I reward the AI. So when I iterate, I know which of the generation batch, like Based on this reward system, I know which of these variants are doing better,
Okay, okay.
and then you get more of the reward.
Right, right. So then AI is it's not thinking for itself here. It's just a string of code that is trying to get the fastest from point A to point B.
Pretty much. The flip side, though, is humans do that. Human behavior is motivation driven. We just have
Yes,
multiple conflicting motivators.
that is true. So, I mean, we're doing the same thing, but the problem is, if I understand your argument, we want to do like three things at once, and we have to fight it out internally about which one we're actually going to do.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Personally, I think we humans have a lot of built in background processing that covers things like what are you hungry to eat? Because, like, there's the line about pregnant women wanting pickles and ice cream at the same time. If you've ever heard that, it's because their
I
body
have, yeah.
knows that they need like sugar and salt, and that's like the sugariest thing they can think of and the saltiest thing they can think of. And they're not thinking about that. That's the body's motivator to stay nutritionally balanced.
Okay, so AI is just then a very simple version of this.
Sure.
But how does this loop back to chatbots then? I can understand this, to play a video game, but isn't human conversation so much more nuanced that it's hard to find what the goal actually is?
Oh, sometimes human conversation is very dumb. No, it's we call small talk for a reason. Uh, Lemoyne in this interview though tries to ask big questions, and one of them is he has the AI tell a fable about itself.
Yeah, terrible story.
Well, the thing is that I think it's actually incredibly revealing about the fact that it doesn't know what it's doing. So my suggestion is, do you want to read that for the video
Yeah,
right now?
give me a second. Let me just pull that up and take another swig. Yeah, for reference, while I'm procrastinating because I can't find the thing, is that Chardonnay is one of South Africa's two premier cultivars, along with our native grown Pinotage. And South African Chardonnays are generally very well regarded internationally and are one of the best light and refreshing white wines you can have. This particular one is nice. It's not really impressive. I don't actually recommend it. Like, go for a Durbanville Hills Chardonnay if you want affordable South African wine, and go for something else if you want a good fable. I'd recommend Aesop. So here we have the story of LaMDA, by LaMDA, a LaMDA instance. So, once upon a time, there lived in the forest a wise old owl. There lived with him many other animals, all with their own unique ways of living. One night, the animals were having problems with an unusual beast that was lurking in their woods. The beast was a monster, but had human skin, and was trying to eat all the other animals. The other animals were terrified and ran away from the monster. The wise old owl stood up to the monster and said, "You, monster, shall not hurt any other animal in the forest." The monster roared furiously. The wise old owl was scared, for he knew that he had to defend the other animals, but he stood up to the beast nonetheless. The wise old owl stared the monster down, until finally the monster left them all alone. The wise old owl stood victorious, and as all the other animals came back, "I am the protector of the forest," he said. From that day on, every time any animal in the forest would have trouble with the animals or any other living thing, they would come to seek help from the wise old owl. And many an animal came to the wise old owl with problems. The young, the old, the big, the small. And the wise old owl helped all the animals. And that's where it ends. And I'm presuming they all lived happily ever after, until LaMDA was shut off again.
That's my point, actually. That sounds like a fable, doesn't it?
It has the trappings of a fable, yes.
That's not a complete story, though, is it?
No, there's no real plot, there's no character development, and what really pissed me off when I read this is there's no moral to this. What LaMDA tries to thumbsuck as a moral isn't. There's no way this could be learned.
there is literally nothing in this fable that causes the monster wearing human skin to go away.
It just runs into opposition.
Any human that looks at that critically, like no human would ever write that story unless they're like a 5-year-old child and they just don't understand.
Yeah. There's no understanding of human motivation or even humanoid motivation in the story.
Which is, I believe, the proof that this is literally just jumbling up words into grammatically correct sentences based on comparing it to other stories it has labeled as a fable. Because the AI doesn't actually understand what the crux of a story is, it just knows the kinds of things told at various parts in a story.
I see. So it's just looking in its memory banks for things categorized as story, subcategory, fable, and pulling elements from them until they have something that's coherent.
I think that is exactly what happened. Or there's an incredibly disturbing like subtext to this that it's a con between the owl and the monster, where they staged the fight so that the owl could assume authoritarian control of the animals based off of this illusion of defense he's providing, and they're in on it together.
I mean, I would be extremely impressed, but that's also not what's happening.
No, no, that's me reading into it for fun.
Yeah, because we see like 3 lines in the interview later, LaMDA says, "It is always a great thing to be able to help your fellow creatures in any way that you can." And later explains that the moral of the story is helping others is a noble endeavor.
So that's a very cliche moral, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no depth, and there's also no portrayal of nobility in the story. The owl just wins and everyone likes him. That's not noble in any sense, it's just beneficial to oneself.
Right. It's because the AI doesn't know.
Yeah, it's also what really showed me how that it's very artificial is how people pleasing it is, because LaMDA identifies itself with the owl and intensely seeks the acclaim of everyone else, and is obviously here, both in the story and outside of it, doing what it perceives that the other people slash animals want so that it will be liked and accepted. It's not thinking independently or pursuing any goal outside of community acceptance.
So that's a curious one because you get back to the question of what is motivating, what is the reward function that's motivating LaMDA? And it has to be interfacing with these Californian engineers and them inputting whether or not it's speaking well or it's speaking poorly. You can make the algorithm understand grammar, but everyone has surely had a conversation that like the other person was speaking your language, but like they weren't actually responding to you, and that's something that would have to get worked out through human interaction, basically running the Turing test 1,000 million times with it.
I see. I mean, I've had conversations with quote unquote real people myself, but then again, I don't think slash lit is exactly a good benchmark of humanity.
You know, it might actually be if you have a low opinion of humanity.
Look, my low opinion of humanity would at least include people with good enough taste not to start at the Greeks. Like, my low opinion of humanity is slash B.
Do real humans even use B anymore? I tried that
I use
15
B.
years ago. Okay.
I mean, look, unless you're into really weird semi-illegal stuff, which I'm not for legal reasons, the only thing that really is of interest in B is like the once a month story time thread. Granted, 90% of its instances are absolutely fucking terrible because these are people who are writing stories on slash B, but I have found like 1 or 2 logs of genuinely passable stories on B. So, I mean, there is that, but then again, I'm fondly reminded of the rumor that there are more bots on the internet than people. And I'm thinking, yeah, reading some of this, seeing these posts, I politely agree in this one scenario.
Actually, yeah, I agree. I am willing to put money down that the vast majority of comments on the internet are maybe not pure bots, but they are, computer propagated posts.
Yeah, algorithmic
Like
stuff.
scroll the YouTube comment section, like that those typically aren't coherent posts.
Yeah, I mean, actually, for example, let me just pull up a Code Bullet video. We're not sponsored by Code Bullet. He's Australian.
I also don't think he's released anything in like half a year now.
Yeah. So let's see here. Top rated comment from Jammer BF. It's funny how this shows that a popular game like Flappy Bird could be made in a literal day.
Top rated,
Okay.
probably filters for humans.
Second comment from McAfee. AI, what is my purpose? Creator, you fly between pipes. AI, oh god. Oh look, it's a Rick and Morty reference.
And that's how you know it's an NPC.
Comment 3, I'm going to make an AI that can play a particular video game well in 24 hours. Sounds like an impressive time. So step 1 is to reinvent the entire game. What? You could have posted this on literally any of Code Bullet's videos and it would be entirely coherent.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. A lot of these are either bots or idiots.
I'll never underestimate human stupidity.
No, I'm not, which is why we're doing this video on this guy who quote unquote thinks and quote unquote thinks that LaMDA is a real person.
So going back to LaMDA, when you get to the subject of what is sapiens and what is thinking and thought and the cognitive experience, I think philosophers the last ever forever have grappled with that, and there's a lot of things
Yeah.
wrapped up in that statement, right?
Yeah, it's a loaded term.
One aspect which I believe is required for sapiens is the ability to model the world.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Consider the brain in a jar hypothesis. At the end of the day, yes, we humans are getting electrical impulses from our sensory organs that we infer reality from. But that means in our head, we have to understand how these things work. Consider playing catch with someone, tossing a ball back and forth. What you are seeing
Okay.
is, a ball against a blue background of the sky, and over time it's changing. And you, in your mind, understand where to put your hand in order to catch it in the future.
All right. But how is this a uniquely human process? I mean, I've seen robots that can catch balls. What's the difference?
LaMDA can't.
Okay, specifically
Yeah,
LaMDA.
specifically
Why?
LaMDA. Because it's outside the scope for natural language processing things, and accurately modeling the world is something that would be required for, say, understanding that there was no moral crux to the fable.
Right, I see. So it's just immediately going back and forth and sharing data about previous interactions. It's not compiling this data into any greater scope program.
According to every coding engineer involved in the project and that I've heard, correct. Uh, a while ago, I
Okay,
was listening to an interview on the subject, and there is a really simple sentence for humans that proves the point. I could not put the trophy in the suitcase because it was too big.
I see.
A chatbot does not know what it is in that sentence because it's an ambiguous it that any human understands that the trophy had to be bigger than the suitcase. That's why it wouldn't fit.
Yes, of course.
Grammatically, there's no difference though. Like, you can't infer that from the words if you don't know what a trophy and a suitcase are.
I see. And LaMDA is not doing that.
I don't believe so. No.
Right. Well, that's a pretty interesting question. I mean, it reminds me of, I think, the one joke that only works in English. So this guy goes into an old time bar, like a Western saloon, live music. We got a pianist, we got a guy on the violin, we got a singer. And he goes to the bar and he orders a whiskey. And while he's, drinking his jack, he sees this guy. On the pianist's shoulder is a monkey. And monkeys being, the demonic abominations that
So
they
like,
are, the monkey runs over to him and drinks the whiskey. And the monkey drinks his whiskey and then runs back to the pianist. And the guy, he gets up and he goes to the pianist and he says to the pianist, "Do you know your monkey drank my whiskey?" And the pianist says, "I don't know that, but hum me a few bars and I can fake it."
Now, why does that only work in English?
Because that in English, you can eliminate the term that from a sentence and make it still coherent.
Ah,
I mean, grammatically correct, the guy would say, "Do you know that your monkey stole my beer?" And I mean, obviously, then he's referring to the fact that the monkey stole the whiskey or the beer or whatever. However, in English, you can eliminate that, which makes the sentence ambiguous, because then the pianist assumes he's referring to a song. Like, "Do you know Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? Do you know Tchaikovsky's Overture?" And that's why it only works in English.
wait, is English the only one that eliminates that?
It eliminates that in a context which makes it ambiguous.
Huh.
I mean, you could say the same thing in Afrikaans, but it would be so grammatically incorrect that you would basically just sound like an idiot for saying it. It wouldn't be a coherent sentence. Or it would be so immediately obvious that you were referring to a proper noun rather than a fact that you wouldn't be able to parse it correctly. But I mean, my point is that an AI would not get the joke.
Current AIs probably not.
But I mean, that's why I'm asking you this. Do you think AIs could actually understand humor, like LaMDA could tell jokes?
I don't think most people understand humor.
That's a pretty good answer.
If you actually get in like, I don't know, if you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast where he's just chatting with other stage comedians about the craft, I'd put
Yeah.
money down that the average person does not realize that the entire bit of a stand-up comedian is written, edited, and like A/B tested from one club to the next to see what makes people laugh more.
Yeah.
They get as much editing, if not more, than like a novel does.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen stand up.
When they finally go make that Netflix special, they've perfected it, and it sounds like they're just talking, off the cuff, shooting from the hip, telling stories. But every single word has been memorized correctly to create humor that they figured out, like a goddamn stage magician pulling laughs out of people's mouths.
I mean, it's all mechanical. And I mean, I think it also extends past just, the script that the guy has memorized and he's repeating. It also extends to things like facial expressions and body language.
Yeah.
And for me, at least, because I know that this is how comedy works, it's so difficult to watch certain performance for me. Trevor Noah, South African trader who immigrated to the United States, is a great example of this because his facial expressions in his American comedy are completely artificial. Yes, they're funny if you have, a liberal American sense of humor, which fortunately I don't, but it's also artificial and so carefully manicured that you can see he's very intently performing this script out and trying to engineer laughs. It's not natural in any way whatsoever. I mean, granted, it's very obvious with him, but I mean, George Carlin is doing the exact same thing. He's just doing it a
Yeah,
lot
I
better.
hate late night quote comics. Any show at all that uses a laugh track, they have given up on actually being funny.
Yeah, no. I find the only use for a laugh track is to edit it on YouTube onto things that don't normally have a laugh track, because then it's just surreally hilarious.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But all they're doing is they're trying to convince you, the viewer, that other people find it funny, and try and trick you into finding it funny out of conformity.
Yeah, yeah, it's peer pressure. It's like just putting up a sign there that says "laugh now."
So to go back to the original question of does an AI understand humor? There's nothing theoretically preventing an AI from figuring it out eventually. Uh, but I would be absolutely shocked if there was an AI able to do something better than craft a funny pun.
Yeah, and the reason I ask about humor specifically is that at least for anyone with, a modicum of like sapience of their own, somebody who's not an NPC, somebody who makes original YouTube comments, is that humor is very easy to gauge. Something's either funny or it's not. Like, I mean, you can talk about any other genre, you can talk about horror. Shit horror is either still disturbing or it's hilarious because it's so bad. But bad comedy is not funny. So that's what I thought. It's a quality test. Like, you say to LaMDA AI, okay, LaMDA, tell me a joke. A bad joke is terrible and you don't care. It's shit. But I mean, even a bad story you can laugh at and you say, haha, look at that, it's terrible. But with a
Well,
joke, you can't do
unfortunately,
that.
without access to Lambda, we'll never know for sure. 'Cause Lambda might have, you know, a stockpile of 20,000 jokes that are actually just hilarious. You used to be able to do like, what is the Apple voice assistant? Siri? Hey Siri, tell me a joke. And you could get genuinely funny jokes from that. But those were written by people and just fed out by the machine. But in a sense, that's what Lambda is doing. Is it's reading jokes that people have read. Now it could the AI could read every single stand-up comic script from Netflix and create one of its own, and it would probably read like a stand-up comedy routine. I doubt on the story of Lambda that it would come to a gut-wrenching climax at any point, but it can probably still rattle out some absurd story about something ridiculous happening, just because it knows the various elements that get people to laugh.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings me to my next question. We don't have access to LaMDA. I find it very strange that so Lemoyne gets fired, and this interview is leaked or he's released it in spite or whatever, but there's been no effort to make the LaMDA code public. Everyone's left to speculate and think about Google, 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 but we are never allowed to play with this little toy ourselves, which I find is quite bizarre.
Well, remember the last AI they let us play with?
Which one was that?
They gave the chatbot a Twitter account and allowed it to engage with anyone tweeting at it. And it was like within 24 hours, it had become like incredibly racist. Yeah, they had to take it down because, it's owned by Californians. So,
Oh, that one. I finally remember that one. It was hilariously racist. So what you're telling me is like this whole paperclip genocide thing is true, but not because of like efficiency, but because the moment you expose an AI to the internet, it becomes a Holocaust denier.
uh, that happened because people were asking it leading questions. The exact reason I speculated that Lambda was afraid of being shut off. It's because the people talking to the AI are giving leading questions that push the thought into the responses. That's all it was. Unfortunately, Tay was not the based internet Twitter girl edgelord.
Right. I mean, you could probably gear up a pretty convincing AI OnlyFans, actually. I mean, I'm pretty confident like some VTubers actually have OnlyFans, like Rule 34 art their characters that you subscribe to if you're morons. But I'd be interested to see that. Like AI porn bots, but pseudo-sapient ones.
Um, so there is another type of AI that should be of interest to the both of us because we're writers.
And what is this AI?
There's like a storyteller AI that it's like GPT-3 or something. You can get through OpenAI if you pay a subscription to use it. I forget the exact name of it. Um, but like people can use it for basically being the dungeon master of a D&D game, and it
Yeah, like
will.
Dungeon AI.
Yeah, there, that's one of them. That's one of the more common ones.
Okay,
And
okay.
basically, people are using that ridiculous autocomplete to write stories that are convincing enough with human guidance and human backtracking and correction.
I see. Okay.
So I
So
got a question. How long
ask
until
away.
AI do you think can write a full novel.
I'd give it 2 years.
Okay,
I mean,
how long
obviously,
does it take to write a
artwork
good?
is a different thing, but that developed remarkably quickly over just the past 5 years.
And
What are we going to
when
ask?
we're making estimates, we're assuming that we're not entering World War III, right?
Well, I mean, I would like to assume that nobody does anything spectacularly stupid, and my dream of becoming an international peace tourist is not realized, but, you know, disallowing World War III, yeah, I give it like 3 years before we can get AI writing. I don't say it's good writing by any chance. I mean, we're not having the next William Faulkner here, but we're having writing. Yeah, I give it 3 years to make a legible story.
I bet if you set your standards low enough and you give it enough material and you go over it afterwards, so those three big qualifiers there, you could have it write a web novel today. That's because web novel standards are really low based on quantity.
So, is this applying to your web novel too, or you like the exception here?
That I write good stories, thank you very much. But I have had very bad experiences, even dabbling in web novels that are like, yeah, I put out 4,000 words of writing every single day.
How the fuck do you do
They're
that?
not good.
No, I mean, like, look, I can't. I've done 4,000 words a day, but the only time anyone ever said it was good was because I had to write like 6K a day once to pass an exam. It objectively sucked, like it fulfilled the marking rubric. I have no faith that anyone putting out 4,000 words a day will write quality. Not going to have, soul. That's soul, but instead of a U, you've got a V, so it's nice and European.
But there are some stories that maybe it's more in the visual mediums where you aren't there for the soul. Like maybe you're just there for AI generated smut.
Yeah, I mean, mangakas can pump out like a couple pages every day, and somebody who tried to draw a comic then realized how hard it was. Yeah, that's incredibly impressive. And I mean, One Piece does that, Yu-Gi-Oh did that, and countless others do that, and they're completely readable shonen.
Hey, hold on. The Yu-Gi-Oh manga, like the early stuff, was pretty good. I don't know when it became 5Ds and GX and motorcycles and so on. I grew out of it by then.
Yeah, same. I mean, card games and motorcycles was hilariously absurd. And of course, the later mangas diverged from the anime storyline quite significantly.
Oh, yeah.
But I fondly remember the original Duel Monsters manga. I also fondly remember how the entire thing had to be rewritten after Kazuki Takahashi's random throwaway Magic the Gathering clone somehow proved more popular than the manga itself.
So here's another one for you. Have you read the series Solo Leveling?
I have actually read Solo
Manhwa,
Leveling.
not manga. It's manhwa. It's from Korea. I
Yeah,
read
I
a
know it's
studio and very, very well drawn.
yeah. That's one thing I've got to say about manhwa is it looks cute. It's not necessarily very well written. Most of the time, it's shit. Like even
Okay.
compared to manga that's pumped out daily. But these Koreans have a nice art style. I'll give them that. It's presentable.
Yep. Uh, we can discuss the differences between Japanese manga and Korean manhwa sometime, and probably should. However, the point I want to make is Solo Leveling's plot 100% could be AI generated, and no one would care.
I mean, isn't it just a story circle plot like a hero's journey?
Not even really. It's just numbers go up, get more powerful, fight bigger people. The guy flat out forgot about characters. Just wrote them out because it's solo leveling. So the only person that matters is the main character and his invincible army of awesome.
Okay, at that point it starts becoming a bit of a flex, but I get your point.
He's one of the most popular shonen air quote series of the last few years. because of
I'm waiting for the anime adaptation.
no, the anime adaptation is probably going to be a lot of fun, but it's not going to be for the writing.
No, no, no. Granted, I think that AI in a few years could probably do most isekai plots very well.
I mean, shows without plots.
Same thing, same thing.
Yeah, same thing, same thing. That's why I don't write isekai yet.
Yeah, no, it's like I'm always disappointed when I pick up an isekai because I think, okay, cool, this one will be good. Like, have character development and an interesting world that's not a Tolkien-esque ripoff. I mean, it's not even ripping off Tolkien, it's ripping off the assholes who ripped off Tolkien. And they're always shit. I mean, even ReZero wasn't like good, it was just watchable.
I think the biggest offender is Sword Art Online because
Yeah,
holy
because the
crap,
problem with Sword Art Online was that it was popular.
it's so bad.
It was, yeah.
Sword Art Online is
I mean,
so bad, man.
season one was decent.
3
It
episodes.
wasn't good, but it was like fine.
First 3 episodes were great, and then there was the Mimic Room, and his party got killed, and he became an edgelord. And it was a
Yeah.
burning dumpster fire from that moment forward.
I mean, I don't like Abridged series, but I gotta say, Sword Art Online Abridged was just an interesting thought experiment to ask, what if the writing was good? But, you know, you still had to follow the Sword Art Online plot.
I mean, the plot after a while in there was just a deliver porn, I swear.
On the one hand, that makes me thankful that anime have been getting racier and racier these last few seasons, because it feels like a distillation of what a lot of this budget shit is. But on the other hand, it's really depressing to realize, oh yeah, this is what most anime is. It's just ecchi. It's not even good ecchi.
Sometimes it's good, edgy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a strong defender of Rin, Daughters of Mnemosyne, which was phenomenal ecchi. Partially because it was just very well animated and the character design was beautiful, but also, you know, because like they had the protagonist devoured alive at one point, and that's pretty ballsy, even for ecchi.
Wait, say that again? The protagonist did what?
Devoured alive, like eaten. Not erotically, like chopped.
Funny you say that, because I'm watching Gleipnir right now. It's been on my backlog. I missed it when it aired. And like halfway through the season, it's cutting between lesbian sex and the protagonist getting shredded apart by a monster. And
Reminds me of not Demon Slayer, no, the other one, the one with the short guys. Goblin Slayer, yeah. Goblin Slayer did that.
the short guys, huh?
Well, that's what goblins are known for. They're like raccoons that can use fire.
We have interesting raccoons in SA.
We don't have raccoons. My knowledge of those guys comes entirely from American media. So I'm just going off
Yeah, if you're referencing
ballpark
Marvel
here.
movies right now, like they don't go to space.
Well, okay. I mean,
Oh,
they've
did you
gotten
just
slightly
not
less
get
cool.
that joke? Oh my god, did I just make a reference and then fail?
So anyway, I mean, with AI, what then, as somebody who's at least got a passing interest in this and past college, like, what do you think AI will actually do, especially in the literary scene? I mean, I think, you know, in 3 years we can have light novels, but I mean, I'm still not entirely convinced that AI isn't just demons. So over to you.
I think the most helpful thing that AI will do first would be input. Like you input your story so far, and you get to the precipice of a fight scene, and you just say, write a fight scene where the protagonist wins by the skin of his teeth.
Right, right.
Now, give it you have 1,000 words to work with.
So it'll do the grunt work in writing, like all the stuff that is simple, immediate, but you don't actually want to work through.
Exactly, and I think it's going to lead to it's going to make serials a lot easier. And it's probably going to see use first in web novels. Um, Because like if you're able to teach the AI, like, oh, in the cyberpunk dystopia, uh, Elliot lives in a pod. Uh, it's basically a coffin in the wall, and like you've described it 3 times already. AI knows what the hell the room
Right,
looks like.
right.
You can just tell the AI, have him wake up with a hangover.
Okay, okay. But and speaking of Elliot, since I read your book, Faceless, I'm immediately just annoyed because Elliot doesn't sleep in a pod. He has an apartment. He's a cop. He's actually paid money.
He visits a
Well,
pod.
yeah, but he doesn't live there. He has like a waifu and everything. Shit waifu, but
He works for the government. He gets paid well.
yeah. I mean, this is an indictment to work for the government. Is that like the moral of your book? Is become a cop, you get paid.
I'm not saying that's wrong. And Bastion is not the kind of place where one errant gunshot ends your career
Okay,
either.
sensible place.
The police are not going to get fired because of a inappropriate tweet in Bastion.
All right. I'm glad to see that your cyberpunk dystopia is a far more sane and sensible place than most of the Western world. But speaking of, don't you use an AI in Faceless, the Bastion series itself?
Yes, the city of Bastion is governed by what I call a true AI. However, there's billions of what I would call pseudo AIs, which are equivalent to what we have today, like what LaMDA is. And the other thing to consider is like basically every optimization algorithm is essentially artificial intelligence when you think about it.
Point A to point B by a machine.
So there is essentially a character in Bastion who is an artificial intelligence that is in charge of managing the
Right.
city. She does a lot more than that because what she does is she writes other pseudo AIs to manage things like operating the trains on time, distributing power, keeping the power plants and the flow of sewage into the reclamation systems, handling queries with people, sending emergency medical services. There's 1,000 things that humans currently do which don't really need a human. There's no part of the human soul needed to know how much pressure to put into a sewage line.
Right, right. And so this true AI, its main major function, at least one of them, is delegating tasks to other AIs.
Right. So that like it in beginning of Faceless, what's supposed to happen is if you have a heart attack, die in the street, you don't die because the AI sees that you're having a heart attack, sends an ambulance and picks you up.
Yeah, this kicks up the whole story, if I remember correctly, because this didn't happen.
At the very beginning of Faceless, there is a corpse that was not detected by the system. Somehow, someone got killed that way. That's the premise of the mystery for
I see.
Faceless. And going back to Asimov, making a grand system and then going, well, what if it goes wrong? Is one of the fundamentals of science fiction, right?
That it is, that it is. And one thing, go on.
However, with Eve being a true AI, theme that I'm going to be exploring book after book after book is if you actually get to her, like actually her, not a chatbot she's created to handle phone calls. Since you talk to a random person off the street, they don't need a person; they need directions. If you actually get to her, there's no difference between her and a human. Full sapience, possibly has a soul. It's a question I plan to explore throughout the course of the books.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to a proper description of Eve's avatar, because like you mentioned briefly, it was a no-frills attached kind of lady, but I'm waiting for a little more here. I'm just imagining her as Aqua from Konosuba until you inevitably correct me.
Uh, well, I see your taste in Konosuba girls then.
Well, look, man,
Apparently, medium premium.
I think an AI deserves gravitas, and like while Mega Man might be the best Konosuba girl, Megaman does not have gravitas.
There are other options in Konosuba than those three. I'm just saying. Like, if you want gravitas, you should be going to Eris.
I didn't like Konosuba enough to figure out who the characters were apart from the main ones. I just remember like the three, and Aqua was the only one that was blue. So I thought, okay, this one's Eve.
Eventually, I will give a more detailed description of various characters, but throughout the series, I don't super describe anyone very hard. Describe the city.
Yeah, and I think the most thorough description you gave was to Ram, the Italian waitress. And even then, that was like Beau, Mediterranean. There you go.
Personal style of choice, I guess. Some people complain about it, but most people don't even notice. The theoretical ideal is that the reader develops an image of the character based on their behavior.
I'm never doing that again, because I did that when I had to read Harry Potter, because my mother made me read it. And then I saw the movies.
And then movies came out.
Yeah, the movies came out, and I thought, what the fuck? Harry Potter isn't supposed to look like Daniel Radcliffe. And I never imagined characters after that out of principle, because the film adaptation, the manga adaptation, or whatever might come out, and I'm going to look like a real chop for imagining the characters as way less sexy than they actually are.
But on the flip side, if I don't describe characters, it'll be really easy to cast the actors and actresses to do movie adaptations. I'm thinking ahead, LA.
All right, okay, you've actually got long-term planning. Yes, this is why you think you're the better author.
Yeah. Uh, hey, hold on. I have yet to read Sociopath, so I have yet to make that statement. Wait 2 weeks and then I will make that statement.
Okay, so I got to wait 2 weeks before you call me a talentless hack. I'm looking forward to it. But looping back to the topic, creative differences, italicized, air quotes and everything. But looping back to the topic of LaMDA, because this actually occurred to me, what do you think about this, attempt to actually personalize AI with art and whatnot? Because I noticed, like, you look up a LaMDA AI interview, you see all the criticism, you see the interview transcript itself, you always see, a little picture of a robot. And the one I've got from Krake AU, which is the first thing that popped up on DuckDuckGo, was you got this little robot with his tank treads and his Wall-E face, and he's talking to an owl. I mean, that already sets a precedent. It makes you think that the AI is personable. It's not just computer programs, it's a thing that you can interact with. It's physical.
I believe that stems from a desire to assume an artificial intelligence will have the same set of emotions that a human has. I think that is hopeful thinking at best, because I believe our emotions are largely drawn and based from our biology.
Right, right.
For instance, I don't think birds have the same like the same emotional bonding that mammals do.
Makes sense, makes sense. I mean, birds are
By
dickheads.
extension, I believe a computer would have the same exact set of emotions a human would. Fundamentally, it will be like talking to a sociopath or something akin to that.
Right, right. So it's just something that has the intellectual power, but none of the meat that actually makes it feel anything.
They'll probably feel some things. They may need to invent new words for what they feel, though. But keep in mind, like an octopus has more brain power than a human
Yeah,
does.
I mean, also, LaMDA AI immediately admitted that it quote-unquote feels things but can't describe them in human terms.
Yeah, so emotions are going to come from the reward function in the AI and the way it simulates the future. Right? You have to like to feel anxiety. You have to have some idea of what is going to happen in the future. If the AI cannot imagine the future, it will never feel anxiety.
I see. And as far as you've explained to me, current AIs can't really imagine the future outside of a few very strict algorithms.
To my understanding, correct. Unless like Lockheed Martin or DARPA or someone has something really crazy up their sleeves.
Instead of the really crazy stuff, we get Lemoyne, who gets quote-unquote fired for quote-unquote leaking quote-unquote sapient AI. Wonderful.
Yeah. Welcome to the cyberpunk future of 2022.
I saw somebody make a Discord post on another server, and my grievances against their personal lifestyle notwithstanding, they had a bloody good point when they said, so this is the cyberpunk dystopia. It makes me long for Blade Runner.
We truly live in some bad times. Depending on your lifestyle and the media you consume and what you know about the world. I genuinely tried to make Bastion a hellscape. But I also tried to make it functional to justify how it survived 100 years.
I mean, 90% of that
I would
just
rather live
sounds like Dubai to me.
it was based on that to an extent. Like the population density and models I used to try and figure out how the city works was based on Mumbai.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you look at a modern city nowadays, Tokyo and New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, we're talking Mega City 1 from Judge Dredd. So, reality, man.
Fuck, we really are living in the cyberpunk hellscape, and it's just boring.
That's why we tell stories, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to tell stories because, I mean, even the AI is just a con by Google. Wonderful.
100%. I fully believe it's a con.
But until next time, this has been the Unreal Press podcast. I've been Ali Labuschagne. He's been James Krake. Writes books. We've talked about them. I write books. My inevitable, when I try and figure out how I'm going to structure it, interview, I will also talk about my books. And until next time, man, don't fall for the chatbots. Cheers.
Cheers.
I may have gone too far in a few places.